like I mentioned before, Netflix announced its... Are you able to hear my dog barking?
Yeah, the audio turned a bit rough.
When the dog started barking, or just in general? Oh, I didn't get the pun. Oh.
Thank you.
Oh, well done,
Lance.
Thank you.
Who will take that crown from you at Funimation? The pun crown.
No one. Whenever they threw me a going away party, and my cake had a pun, and then the gift bag that I got, there was a book of one-liners, and then there was a book on the history of the pun.
Wow.
Yeah.
If nothing else, they understood what you really brought to that company.
I brought the fun.
Hey everyone, welcome to Zonin Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. Today we're talking about online streaming, specifically the way we deal with issues like VPNs, geoblocking, or anything related to the ever-popular phrase, this video is not available in your country, which is something that we're all very attached to, I think. And today we have a very special guest on the show, Funimation's former director of corporate strategy, Lance Heiskell.
Hello.
And Lance, you're currently running the Anime Nostalgia Bomb blog, right?
Yes.
What are you up to on that?
I am up to 2000.
Up to 2000?
How that started was, I've been at Funimation since November 2002, and my first con was Anime Central 2003, and I had a digital 8 camcorder, and I would take pictures, show people at work, this is anime, these are the fans. It's not, just dudes that watch Dragon Ball Z. And so every con I keep stuff. Whenever at work we have magazines, and whenever we moved, we were going to throw all the magazines away. Like people were going to throw magazines. Like, no. So I kept a ton of magazines. And then about 4 years ago, I was just looking through them, and I'm like going, I've got about 6 years of Animericas. And I was curious to see how far it went back. And it was 1992, and I could buy issue 0 for $10. I'm like, sweet. And then I saw on eBay that I could buy it the second year for $20. I'm like, okay. And that old gene in me that made me collect baseball cards, that's what I did with magazines. Cause I did Animerica, I have all of Anime Insider, and then Toshi Yoshida, who everybody knows from Ocean Dubs and everything, Ranma, he was saying, oh, did you get Animag? I'm like, what is Animag? And so I got the entire run of Animag, and then Helen McCarthy with Anime UK and Anime FX. I found those, got all those runs, and then I've saved everything at work from convention program guides, ads, tchotchkes from cons, and now I have so much to display. It's going to take me a while.
So you're basically scanning all this stuff and kind of preserving it on this blog for, well, I was going to say for future generations to see, but I'm not, do young people read it, or is it all just more old timers who reminisce?
It's old timers that reminisce, which is great, because I just know that from my research at work is there's a ton of old timers that are still in the anime. And if it just gives you the feels, like I would go in my Google Analytics and see a person that spent 40 minutes on the site, I'm like, sweet. And that's basically what I do it for. It's like, it makes me smile when I see someone's on the site for more than 10 minutes.
I really love reading through all that old ADV copy on their ads.
Oh, it's ADV copy is the best. It is the best. And then, just being in awe of the first years of Animerica, where there were ads of Uroskodochi and Ray Ray, and it was just like ads of hentai just out in the open. I'm like, wow, that is cool.
So also here today is Karl Olson. You may know him as Ultraklystron, nerdcore rapper, and he also did the theme song for this show.
Yay!
Say hi, Karl.
Hi. I still technically moderate on ToonZone as well, but it's not as busy on forums these days.
Karl, in addition to your musical career, you're also a man between worlds. You're an American living in Canada.
Yeah, and I have full dual citizenship, so I have seen both sides of this divided internet fence and lived on it at this point. Like I went to school up here, and then I went back to the States for a bit, and then I went to work up here. So after having, I grew up in the U.S., so it's like, it's really weird to get into the habit of, oh, I can stream this, and then I come up here, I'm like, no, I can't, but then I can stream something else.
We've made more than a few attempts to try and stream Toonami up here, though. What did we do again? You had your...
I try to use my Comcast, my parents' Comcast cable account, up here, and neither through a VPN nor directly would that play ball.
Yeah, we got it to work for about 10 seconds, and then it just kind of died, and then we just gave up and just torrented the Space Dandy dub.
Did you try Slingbox?
I had a similar device to the Slingbox, but it was discontinued with support. And I'm not sure whether on one hand, it would be probably $12 a month to run an extra cable box down there.
Got it.
But at the same time, I'm like, to do that for literally one block of television seems kind of crazy.
Hey, it's a great block.
It is a fantastic block. Like, it was kind of, so when Jesse finally got to watch Toonami for the first time was kind of a revelatory experience for him, because as I recall, you used to not get why people cared.
I didn't get it
so much.
People just love those edited intros so much. And
then when you see the whole package as contextualized together, you're like, oh, that's a hell of a way to sell a show.
Yeah, I fell to Steve Bloom's Siren Song, so.
I honestly think, particularly for people who were as young as my little brother who just turned 22 to like my age, and I'm 31 now, I think Toonami was key at getting people into anime in that time frame, because you could just, whereas nothing else tried to sell it like it was cool. It was just another cartoon. Like, when you get done watching that minute 30 promo of Tenchi Muyo and you're like, I'm going to watch that show. I'm going to watch the hell out of it. Like, you wouldn't have watched it you wouldn't have cold watched it. But after you see that in between, like, other stuff you're watching, you're like, I better watch this show. It seems like the raddest thing I've ever seen. And then when you watch, you're like, actually, it was really pretty good.
Yeah. Well, that was always one kind of problem from a Canadian perspective, is that so much of the industry was kind of piggybacking off of the whole Toonami phenomenon. And even though the industry, it serves all of North America, it's kind of focusing on this one thing that's only in the United States. And it took us a while to catch up, and, things got kind of balanced in the end. But, we're still seeing some sort of legacy problems and remnants of that whole idea of the Canada-US divide. And it's come up in some interesting ways with streaming. For the most part, most of the companies have some kind of system set up to ensure that, people on both sides of the border are able to access the content they're supposed to access. Other companies do not. And I think there's kind of an interesting mentality behind it, because, it's probably kind of hard. I've talked about this with Lance before, that it's hard for American companies to sort of understand that mentality of being geo-blocked, because it doesn't happen to people in America very often.
Ever.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like a streaming privilege, kind of. Like, you don't understand what it's like to be met with the phrase, this video is not available in your country. Like, you take that so personally, and, I find that people a lot of the time when they see that, they have no desire to ever go back to a site ever again after they've been met with that message. That said, anime companies have been, I found, better than most media industries when it comes to sort of trying to accommodate Canada despite, still having to make as much money off of US audiences as they can, which I assume is a big reason of why Hulu is a focus in the streaming game for companies like Funimation and Viz. So Lance, as Director of Corporate Strategy, I'm assuming that you were fairly heavily involved with the streaming ventures?
Well, more at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then towards the middle and the end, it's kind of the person that I said, okay, you're going to handle digital. He's still handling digital, and then it's split between him and home video. So yeah, it's because I think we started back in around 2006, or I think it was in 2006, getting digital. We were one of the first on iTunes and one of the first on PlayStation. Or we would get home in the front page coverage, and then once all the major networks added theirs, they're like, Funimation who? And so, because just from the digital streaming, the reason why Hulu is just the one of choice is it's all about the CPM. And so with the CPM is all the ad dollars. So the commercials you see is there's a dollar amount per CPM is 1,000.
Yeah.
And then you're delivering the episodes to them and they're doing all the serving. They're doing everything for you.
Doing all your ad sales, all your analytics, I imagine. I mean,
all
CPM
of that.
being the analytics terms, clicks per milli. I used to work at Bing, so I know this game.
Yeah. And so it's buy or build. And so on our website, early on, I credit this to Kent Wong, who bugged me every time he would be at Otakon and Comic-Con of going down to Anime North. And whenever I finally got to Anime North, and when people were saying North America and, and just Toronto and just understanding, and whenever Vivendi Universal did our home video and I would go to their main offices and just kind of, Canada's cool, and just understand everybody's problems and then bringing it back to work and just letting people know, it's like, this is 10% of your customers. You don't want to piss 10% of your customers off.
Yeah, well, before the Navarre acquisition of Funimation, they didn't really have any distribution outside of the US. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and then if it was a company before, but they just really didn't do like Boom Power, some distribution. I can't remember. Yeah, it was like nothing. And
I imagine that 10% could be make or break on a title. Like if you can monetize that extra 10%, that's the difference between being in the red and being in the black on some of the more niche stuff.
Yeah, and so whenever all the times we did Funimation.com was making certain that if you have a Hulu player, making our own player, that we would run ads on and, making it for Canada. So that was kind of, which is kind of weird with Viz doing all their stuff on Hulu. And can you get Viz stuff yet in Canada streaming?
We're going to get to that in a bit, but no.
Okay.
Viz stuff is not available at all.
Which is weird because a lot of the roots come from Canada, which is a bit odd. So a
lot of the dubs come from Canada too.
Yeah. I think if it's a lot of it is just having someone go to Canada, because all companies are US based, and just going there, having a presence and just understanding it. Because I would be so pissed off if this video was not available in my country. I don't get it. I don't get it much. I mean, the only time I got it was for Doctor Who, and that was it.
Yeah, I think it's the only time when the U.S. audience catches it if there's something on like iPlayer, and then that's the only kind of taste of that like, oh, you could have this service you'd love to have, and you were just simply in no way allowed to touch it. Or not without like a lot of runaround.
And so now BBC America, whenever the new Doctor Who comes out, it's in America in 4 hours on prime time. And so they did that to negate piracy.
Well, and I mean, that seems to be, that's the other side of this is obviously the better you serve any of these audiences with streaming, the more you reduce piracy. But I mean, there's also just, it buys you kindness. Like it's funny because Comedy Central's tried to soft sell how, when you're geo-blocked on them. But there's no way around the fact that it's really annoying to be browsing, just, your Facebook or Reddit or some other site, and there's a link to, hey, here's this new funny bit from, Daily Show, and you just know that you can't, you just like again and again, like just every day hitting that.
Yeah. To me, that's the worst part is when embeds in like blogs or, a specific kind of article context, they embed a Hulu link, and then you're just kind of left out on that bit of the context. To me, that's one of the most infuriating things about having to deal with it. And then, you get that you still get that feeling of, I still say a big problem with the internet, even though we perceive it as something that's really international. It's really something that's US centric. I mean, most of its infrastructure is in the United States.
Oh, totally.
And then, I mean, when you get to this geo-blocking thing, it becomes really obvious when you see things like people embedding Hulu links into blogs, just taking for granted that their audience will be able to watch it, when in fact nobody outside of the United States can watch it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the unintentional rickrolling.
Yeah. Exactly. Just
yeah,
the back.
You don't even get the fun of a Rickroll. It's just literally, it's like you're going there and it's just literally a blank page.
Yeah.
Just to backtrack 1 second, and Lance, feel free to correct me on anything in this chronology. The way things developed on Funimation.com is that from the beginning you guys had your own infrastructure set up with the intention of having a subscription service. And everybody in North America was able to, or in the US and Canada rather, was able to access that site.
Well, it's also, well, it was a commercial free, I mean, it was commercial too, so you could stream stuff. The subscription is more for HD and commercial free. Mm-hmm. So it's along the same line of what Crunchyroll does. And Hulu is.
Yeah. After a while, you guys started forwarding everything to Hulu.
Yeah.
And whereas people who subscribed would have access to the full service, but for a while, there was no, like what you eventually did was that you forwarded any Canadian viewers to sort of a dumbed down version of the subscription service, only it would have certain things blocked out like high definition, but it would still allow them to watch the content and get Canadian specific ads.
You got Canadian specific ads.
Whoever you're working with for your video ad network is smart.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
It's only worked. It's had a lot of problems over the years. I've emailed the tech people on the website quite a few times pointing out issues. A lot of the time, it wouldn't always forward to the video player it was supposed to. I would sometimes get Hulu streams, and didn't seem to be any way around it. Last time I checked, on the free side, everything seems to be relatively stable. But I heard complaints from people a lot of the time saying they went to the website and they got Hulu links and just didn't want to go back again. Mm. So, I mean, it's tough to work around that kind of thing. But, I mean, still, even though it doesn't work all the time or there's been a lot of hiccups on the way, I can't think of any other industry apart from, the anime industry and companies like Funimation who kind of try to accommodate the Canadian audience in the way that you guys have. A lot of companies would just be happy just dumping everything on Hulu.
Yeah, well, I think with that is with a lot of outside of anime, it's more just production companies that sell it, and so with Community is owned by Sony, shown on NBC Universal, then they got canceled, and then Yahoo paid for the last season. And with home video is Sony and not on NBC. So part of it is if the studio owns it and runs it on their own network as well.
Interesting note about Community, and I guess I'll use this as a bit of a segue, is that the first 4 seasons of that, and I think the 5th season will probably pop up eventually, is that they're on Netflix in Canada, but not in the US. There's this kind of weird mentality that people have in Canada that Netflix, or there's this perception that Netflix Canada, just by virtue of the fact that it is Canadian, is inherently inferior to the American service, which I find kind of funny because we have a lot of great stuff that the US doesn't have. We have Batman the Animated Series is on Netflix Canada, but not Netflix US, for instance. And at first, Netflix had issues where a lot of the anime was showing up in the US, but not in Canada. But everything seems to be day and date now on that front. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
that falls out of that Hulu divide. There's no Hulu presence here in Canada, so Hulu doesn't end up with rights to it here. So the rights can be grabbed up by a third party like Netflix. But I mean, that then ends up super weird when Community being this very bizarre example of there's probably no reason Yahoo couldn't stream it to Canada, but they didn't buy the rights for it. They're not trying to really push Screen as a service. They're not trying to push Screen as a service necessarily here, which is weird because they are in Australia.
Yeah.
They're like, you get these bizarre things. So and you end up then with Dan Harmon going on Twitter being like, please VPN my show. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And then is Amazon Prime?
No, we do not have Amazon Prime in Canada,
weird.
Which means that there's actually was no legal way to watch Transparent for quite a while. But after it won the Golden Globe, it finally showed up on one of the Canada exclusive streaming services called Show Me. And in here we have an interesting situation because we have our media giants. Shaw owns Show Me, which is kind of their attempt to make their own Netflix. And then Bell has Crave TV, which is their attempt to make a Netflix. Those companies couldn't even work. Even despite all the collusion that exists in our media environment, they could not work together to create one single service. And people have speculated, the purpose of these services isn't to compete with Netflix. It's just to snatch up the rights to things so that Netflix can't get them. Which is really frustrating because if they work together, they could probably make a proper Hulu, alternative, but that's just not happening.
Well, they're both subscription. There's no ad-supported tier.
Yeah,
$4 a month for each of them.
And you have to be subscribed to the cable service that owns it.
So you can't actually get, if I'm on Bell, I can't get Show Me. If I'm on Shaw, I can't get Crave, which is insane.
Yep.
It's region blocking within your own country.
It's sort of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm expecting like Community Season 6 to just kind of get dumped on one of those services at one point.
After it's relevant, because I have a sneaking suspicion that with Community's kind of fan base, they'll have watched it. They'll have watched it already. Or if they'll take a look at, well, I can try and, assuming they can even get that service, they'll be like, well, I can get this for I can get 6 months of Show Me, or I can just buy the DVD.
Oh,
there's nothing else on Show Me that I want.
DVD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we have that's kind of a screwed up situation right now where you can't get that kind of Hulu alternative. And another company that does use Hulu embeds the same way that Funimation does is Sentai's Anime Network, the branded streaming service that just will not let that Anime Network brand die. So they attach it to their streaming service. And if you view it from the States, you get Hulu embeds just like with Funimation. And Lance, I'm curious, do you know what Sentai does for Canadian viewers on their service to sort of compensate for the lack of Hulu?
No.
So they actually offer everything ad-free, free of charge, and in HD.
Awesome.
As far as I can tell, they basically give all the subscriber perks to the Canadian audience because they couldn't. I could have sworn they had their own ad.
It might be. It's like they just don't want to do the time to do legal on it.
Well, the implication to me is that they're going to lose money either way.
Yeah.
Because I mean, is it true to characterize streaming in Canada as like an automatic deficit?
Well, I think with the companies, it is a secondary thought. I like Canada, but it just seems that for all the companies, Canada is a secondary thing. Oh yeah, let's do this for Canada. And I just see that as just really unfair. And because within Canada, within the beginning of the anime, was there ever an anime company that, like a distribution company or just a production company? Because I just wondered for the longest time why Ocean didn't do their own DVD production and distribution. Because Manga UK was first and then Manga US was second. But then...
Incidentally, Manga was one of the companies that has traditionally always had the best distribution in Canada.
Yeah.
I remember when those Evangelion movies came out the first time, they were everywhere. Every store had dozens of copies. Yeah. Whereas at the same time, none of the other distributors seemed to be able to get anything on the shelves.
It's just lack of focus. People forget. I mean, you think of, oh, well, we need to hit the numbers. And I'm like, you guys, it's focus on Canada. It's like people want this. And
I think part of the other tell to me that people wanted is whereas I've seen in the US post anime bubble, some of the anime stores that were actually physical locations and stuff fall off, and there's been some condensation, I think, in the online retail space as well. The same anime store has been in the same location in in a very expensive to rent mall here in Canada for just decade at this point. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks a lot to, people just will come in and purchase and buy. You don't keep that kind of retail space, especially in Vancouver's insane market, unless you're moving retail volume.
Yeah, we got Sakura Media here in Vancouver. And over in Toronto, I know they have one pretty big anime store kind of in their Chinatown district that I'm kind of amazed is able to stay in business, especially with the amount of space they have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember was it Giant Tarantula? There's a lot of comic book shops that I saw in Toronto having booths. And what's happening in America in the last 2 years, they're finally becoming Canadian hobby shops where in America it's always been comic book shops. Comic books. And in recent years where board games are getting more popular and the manga coming out of we don't have Borders anymore. There's there've been cutbacks in Barnes and Nobles. All the manga's coming to the comic book shops, and now tons of merchandise has just been on in so many superhero TV shows and movies that whenever I would go into a hobby shop in Canada, it was just like you got everything. It wasn't just the comic book shop. And now that's what's happening here in America. And to your point, anime still really isn't in hobby shops in the US, but they are in Canada.
Well, also, one big thing is that in the States, you guys have Kinokuniya Books, which hasn't expanded up to Canada at all.
Yeah, but that's very limited, and they are SRP. They really don't discount.
True.
Yeah. It's like y'all have the HMVs and we have our FYEs, and it's like paying full retail at a mall. This day and age, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so.
FYE still hanging in there?
FYE is making a comeback.
Wow.
No.
Yeah.
Because here, like, so I actually on Facebook the other day asked, like, does anybody know where I can buy a CD here in Vancouver? Because I wanted to get the new Tyler, the Creator album, and it's got 5 variant covers, and I wanted to pick my variant rather than just getting whatever Amazon sold me. And basically half the responses was 1998. That's when you can, that's where you can buy a CD in Vancouver.
Oh man.
And we have really what's left is there are 2 HMVs, one downtown and one in Metrotown Mall.
There's one in Surrey as well.
Oh, well, okay. So there's 3 for a metro area of 2 million people.
Wow.
And that's where you can buy CDs because I mean, yes, there's top 40 at like London Drugs and Walmart. Actually, Best Buy here doesn't even carry CDs anymore. They've completely.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
What about record shops?
There are record shops, but the record shops are almost more record shops. Like it's straight vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because record shops here are like half vinyl, half CD.
No, like it's interesting that like the record stores that survived here, I think survived by just going straight vinyl audience, which is cool if there's a vinyl release. But that's not obviously a uniform thing either.
Yeah, it's getting a lot harder to get physical media in Canada, despite the fact that we're not always getting the, streaming infrastructures to compensate for that. We only just got Spotify a few months ago.
Yeah. Spotify used to be another one of these things where somebody would be like, here's the hot new single embedded in this blog. And then you're like, and then you don't care enough necessarily to go find that. Like, I don't even care enough to go try and find if somebody's also uploaded it to YouTube 99 times out of 100. So and I mean, that's the whole thing. I shouldn't have to count as a consumer that this thing that's being made available for free in a region is going to be made available similarly in my region. Like having to like guess and check that is maddening. And I can say that more so than ever having, bounced back and forth between the two countries for about half a decade now.
I think in 5 years that smart companies, I think it's going to be down to, like within anime, it's just going to be worldwide rights. That if it's either going to be company A, company B, or company C is going to be releasing this and they have worldwide rights, and they've made a machine or a platform that you can like turn on different countries where you buy worldwide rights and it's like, okay, well, it's in this country. You don't have ads yet, but let's just play it.
I feel like Crunchyroll's really,
Crunchyroll.
Once they stop trying to figure out that they stop trying to like be a thing to sell, once they decided to be a company.
Yeah.
Like they went in on that incredibly aggressively.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. And then Daisuke, is coming back because was that show, God Eater.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, with Daisuke.
I keep forgetting Daisuke's a thing.
Well, actually, because this anime consortium Japan, which is doing Daisuke, I think
it's actually not a bad approach to just say like we're the producers of this. Let's own the platform straight out.
Yeah,
and
but
then we shortcut a bunch of this legal and this loop.
Yeah.
But then it also gets tied up in all that red tape.
Well,
that comes along with the whole Cool Japan initiative.
True.
Yeah. But they had a panel at Anime Central.
Yeah. No, that shows real commitment. I think anytime the companies start to actually turn out, because I mean, now that you've left Funimation, I think it's way like you marked that change in that company's behavior.
Yeah, it was
Funimation got its head in the game at the fan level when you came on.
That was basically the approach is market how you want to be sold, and just trying to instill that into everybody.
In the case of Daisuke, do they do multiple languages or subtitles in multiple languages?
I don't know. I went to like the Anime Expo panel, but then what I saw was like they had a panel at Anime Expo. Anime Expo, Anime Central. It was one of the guys that was at Bondi Entertainment was running the panel. So part of the problem is, I remember with Bondi Visual is you need, if Japanese companies are coming into America, they need to know how to market to North Americans, not just Americans, North Americans.
Yeah.
I make a point when I'm at a convention doing a panel, I say North America.
But does that include Mexico though?
Well, the thing is
that's where the whole word game starts.
I know.
Yeah.
We have English speaking rights, and so it's kind of like, I feel an insult whenever I say America and all this stuff, because like we have this stuff too. So
that was actually one thing I wanted to bring up about Crunchyroll, is that I've noticed that with a few titles where Funimation would have gotten the exclusive English language rights to something, Crunchyroll would still go for the Canadian French rights, because you have the francophone market in Quebec. There was Selector Infected Wixos, I think, was one show that Crunchyroll actually snagged the French Canadian rights to that show. Cool. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about, aggression. That's thirst.
that is good. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing about Funimation is, and I guess one problem they might face is that everything's going global. Everyone wants to get the global streaming rights, but Funimation has only focused on English language stuff. And, you have all these other languages that aren't English.
Yep. Yeah. It's just understanding that, you wake up and you realize that, this is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
the francophone and Quebecer perspective on streaming. Actually, that's something I'd like to learn more about, but I haven't heard much about it from people in that situation. But, if you know anything about it, let me know.
I know two people that whenever I was at Anime North, it was Summer Wars they wanted us to do, see if we could get a French dub on it. And then I was trying to work on it, but we weren't able to do it. And so, it would be great if you could have a French dub, but then understanding, what type of, dialect or French language, or it's just, you go into this whole rabbit hole of just understanding that, and then it really comes at the end of the day is return on investment and time.
There's such a huge dubbing industry in Quebec, which is why I found kind of interesting that no company's tried to tap into it. I've said this before, but I always thought it would have been neat if Viz had done a French dub of Inuyasha, because, obviously the show was really popular in both the US and Canada, but it was in Canada, it was kind of like our equivalent to Cowboy Bebop, because we never got Bebop on basic cable here, but Inuyasha was sort of that first title that was being marketed towards older audiences, at least on YTV. It would have been interesting if that had translated into trying to also bridge that gap in the Quebec or francophone market as well. Yeah, just one of those interesting might have beens that kind of came from the industry.
Yeah, all these might have beens. It's like, just imagine if one of these networks or one of these cable companies played anime at late at night, like they do in Japan, and see if the audience would have taken it to it bigger.
Yeah, there's definitely, that certainly paid the bills and worked well for Cartoon Network, but there's a lot of other niche content that would have fit better elsewhere. There's always that, what if Lifetime or Oxygen ran shoujo anime late night? That's one of my favorite what ifs.
We pitched them.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what if Much hadn't been bought out by CTV? Maybe they would have gotten. Yeah.
I got into Moist. I got into the Tragically Hip. I got introduced by so many good Canadian bands by watching Much Music.
Oh yeah, you do get a version of it down there, don't you?
Well, whenever
we used to get it straight up basically, and then it split.
Yeah, it was like still to this day one of my favorite bands is the Matthew Good Band.
Oh yeah.
It's just that time is like so much good music was, I mean, there's probably a lot of great music coming out of it. And whenever I got Sirius XM for my Nissan Rogue, they, you get that 6-month trial and you get about 6 channels of Canadian, radio stations.
I've been of the opinion that Canadian content rules have actually helped music. Karl disagrees with me on that.
I feel it's a 50-50. It's good for certain indie stuff, but then it's really bad for your top 40 radio. At points here.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll give you a great example of probably a band that you might enjoy that, my wife caught on Much when they're very late at night when they actually still run music videos up here called the Ooh Baby Give Me Mores. And they had a video that was, partially government funded or much funded that ran for this amazing track. And it's just like, wow, this is great music. And it's music that you got to see because you have the Canadian content rules, and then that's forcing them to invest and actually look occasionally at some really cool new acts. But then there's other stuff that, is, I don't feel that then makes it on to like your top 40 station here. Your top 40 station here really tries its best to like run as much American content as possible, and then the Canadian content they run isn't the really fun, exciting stuff. It's the, what can we play after a Taylor Swift song that isn't going to distract from the Taylor Swift song in a weird way.
Got it. So it's sound-alikes.
It's a little too sound-alikey sometimes.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing is that much music was probably, particularly in the 90s, was probably putting out a much more interesting slice of what was going on in Canada than what was likely getting broadcast on any non-college radio station. College radio here is great, but college radio anywhere is usually pretty exciting.
So next we'll talk about the other companies that tend to just dump their content on Hulu and don't really do anything else to improve its accessibility outside of the United States. A few of the companies that do that include Japanese distributors like TMS Entertainment or Bandai Visual, a lot of the Lupin movies, a lot of the old Bandai Entertainment titles that haven't been relicensed yet in North America have just sort of been put in stasis on Hulu right now, and no real effort has been made to make it accessible outside of that. I'm guessing because it's more of a catalog dumping kind of move, without a lot of consideration for actually making it accessible to as many people as possible. What most people will know as the biggest perpetrator of this, though, is Viz Media. Okay, well, just to put it into context, I'll go back and explain sort of the situation with Viz. So like Funimation and Sentai, Viz did develop their own streaming platform, but the big problem is that they took a different route than those other companies did. They developed Neon Alley, which some people might be familiar with. It started out as a linear streaming broadcaster. So it didn't provide content on demand. It actually functioned like a television station that you would subscribe to for $6 or $7 a month, and you'd follow everything on a schedule. Everything would be dubbed, but they would put, their dub premieres and some of their older content on there to access, and it was available through PlayStation 3, Xbox, and a few platforms like that. And this platform was available to the US and Canada, but it did not include any of their, simulcast content, which was all Hulu exclusive at that point. Eventually that service folded, despite the fact that they started introducing some on-demand content. They eventually folded their own platform and just moved the Neon Alley brand exclusively to Hulu. And when that change happened, they posted this promise that eventually Viz Media would be making the content available to Canada. It has been well over a year since that happened, and I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that they're probably not going to do that, especially since they already invested so much money on, developing a platform of their own that didn't really pan out. No one's really sure what they're going to do. I like to think that the obvious solution would have been teaming up with a company like Chorus and utilizing their embeddable streaming platform, ideally in combination with some kind of broadcast deal. And I like to think that they've at least attempted that. At this point, I doubt it's probably going to happen. So now we're in a situation where it seems very clear that Viz may just be quietly condoning the use of VPNs. And in case you don't know what a VPN is, it stands for Virtual Private Network. It's a service that kind of fools systems into thinking that you're accessing content from a country different from where you are actually accessing it from. You can pay for one that will allow your entire network to fool systems into thinking that you're accessing content from the United States, or you can just use browser plugins like Hola or TunnelBear. But it seems like we've hit this point now where Viz is just, rather than actually making the content available, they're just condoning the use of doing things through VPNs. And that, I'm kind of curious about that sort of approach. Lance, do you think that that's a valid approach for a company to take in terms of making content accessible?
I think that the companies, they didn't even think about people doing VPNs because people running the companies might not be technical to know about that. The ones that are doing the deals with our fans, I mean, our fan base, it's people know how to do this. I mean, before it was like, oh, torrenting, okay. Before torrenting, oh, well, it's news groups. Okay, well, I have to get all these hashes. All right.
Good old IRC.
And before that was, yeah, if you knew how to do an IRC get and see what people have and then share it. I mean, it's people that did that before that. The fan sub trading through the mail or listservs. And so it's embedded within just any nerddom that, I went on the Jonathan Colton Joko Cruise crazy, and I think about 50% of corporate 500 companies had their IT staff go on vacation because everybody worked in IT. And so people are savvy to know what a VPN is, know what a proxy, and then if you're going to do a proxy, it's all about buffering. And so, do you want a data plan for your proxy? I mean, for your VPN, or you want unlimited data? They are smart. They know how to do it.
Yeah, I feel like definitely the Venn diagram of the anime fandom and the IT, computer science, STEM group has always been very heavy. And even as that's diversified, an audience, I mean, that used to be, anime used to have a very, male audience, I guess, for lack of anything more subtle. The fact of the matter is, even as that's diversified, the tools, have only proliferated. The tools to make those tools, I can say as a developer, are a lot easier to deal with. It's a lot easier to make, it's like, oh, we need new software that builds, that lets you access the VPN. Well, the software that lets you make that software, the development environments are better. So you're always up against that. By the nature of the anime fandom, like it is always been very savvy, and it will stay very savvy even as it expands. And I think that almost more speaks to that nerddom growing in tandem together. Oh, I'm into CS. Well, the people you're going to hang out with are into anime. Oh, I'm into anime. Well, the people you're going to hang out are into comp sci. It's just going to be, you're going to catch it one way or the other. I think that's let anime be at the vanguard of a lot of these things. Anime bore out that home video, I think, could work as a business model very early in the game. I think it bore out home DVD could work as a business model very early in the game, and it's bearing out that streaming is valid early. Yeah. But I mean, that's also at points been driven at each turn by piracy first.
Yeah, because with the DVD box sets, it's like anime has been doing DVD box sets 5 to 7 years before regular TV box sets. Because I remember going to Best Buy's, and the only TV season box sets was Buffy. And then it was around 2005 or 2006 when companies finally put out box sets for shows, and they actually sold. And then once that hits, then all the companies are going, we have catalog, flood the market with box sets. And then it was Netflix and Hulu's. It's like, here's this. And so all the companies think, oh, I've already produced this show. I've already put all the money into it. I've already made the money through TV and syndication. Now I can get a second amount of money through the DVDs. Now I get a third amount of money, even more money on Netflix. And so it was kind of secondary revenue. And nowadays Netflix and Hulu's is just a part of your revenue.
Yeah, you budget that in. I mean, It's very obvious that that's the way Sony has treated community the whole way through. Yeah. But I imagine that's a lot tougher for distributors who need that whole pie to add up to, we're going to make the money on television first for most anime titles. there's hopefully you make money on home video first and then streaming, but you're actually going to be simulcasting. So there's going to be already some money hopefully made in that initial run of streaming. And like, it seems like the math gets to be, a lot more finicky. Is that seem
well, in the
right?
case of Viz, one thing that's really frustrating is that a lot of the titles that they stream and are not making available in Canada are titles that they have not released on home video and don't seem to have any plans to release. Like Reborn is one that has just kind of perpetually slipped through the fingers of Canadian audiences. I don't think it's even on iTunes. I think it's pretty much only Hulu, but Viz has not really kind of compensated for that for the Canadian audience. But I am curious, and just regardless of anybody's actual opinion, what is the actual argument against, like the industry argument against using VPNs and sort of maintaining these invisible or imaginary region barriers?
Well, it's contracts. The thing with I just wonder if it started with the DVDs, because with just TV contracts in general with syndication starting in, the 70s and 80s, then that model kind of dipped into TV and DVDs, because with syndication, before cable was really big, it was with Dragon Ball Z, before it was on Toonami, you would either watch it in your town at 6 a.m. or at 3 o'clock in another city, or some city wouldn't even get it. But then if it was on cable, everybody got it at the same time. And with the rights, I know with anime, one part of the committee gets international rights, and then they'll sell the international rights. And some rights are available in some countries, some don't get taken up. And with all the region coding, with DVDs, I mean, people finally cracked the DVD coding a long time ago, but it's mainly for money. If you can syndicate it and get rights for this territory, you get X $1,000, this territory X $1,000. And so when you have networks and with syndication money, I think it's all born out of syndication. And then that model came to the DVDs, and there aren't companies big enough, to have the machine to, when we release this in UK, we're going to have it translated in Japanese with a dub, day and date. We're going to do this in Canada. It's just setting up everything at once. It still can't be done on a global national scale yet. There's not like a platform. Everything is still so fractured, and the fractures are just different companies. Because I know, like with Canada, you have about maybe 3 main companies pumping out all the content, and then America, you've got the 4 major networks. You have a lot of production studios, but a lot of those are owned within the major conglomerates. With anime, you've got maybe 60 different studios doing anime. It's a lot fractured in Japan.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there isn't any parent companies who are on top of these things. They are actually their own business that then pairs up with distribution and pairs up with broadcasting and the rest of that. Yeah, it's just territorial and region coding, and then just the getting it into the different markets. Is there a broad enough fan base in a country? And did some people take the risk of making a business for that? Because I remember just kind of all the Hong Kong bootlegs, and if the market is so bootleggy that the fans are just getting it, is there a company that would be willing to risk it to make it legitimate?
Uh-huh. When in the case of streaming, I mean, the whole issue of having these kind of arbitrary region barriers, at least, in a lot of countries, and definitely in Canada, gets people riled up, which I think is kind of the result of trying to strictly enforce these artificial regional barriers on countries in a way that sort of conflicts with real life political barriers, because in most cases, at least with home video and with anime, and I guess most types of media are licensed, the US and Canada rights are always attached. And Hulu just throws this interesting wrench into the whole thing by only
bizarre,
being available in the United States. And a funny thing about Hulu is that they still have not made any effort to launch in Canada. And I always found it funny that they would be more willing to enter the Yakuza-infested entertainment industry of Japan before they'd even be willing to give Canada a shot, where it's failing miserably, which I think is really funny. And I think Netflix may be in for a similar fate when they try to expand into Japan in the future. But it really seems clear that, Hulu has no intention of expanding into Canada, and then our own infrastructure can't seem to produce a Hulu equivalent of any kind, which seems to be what, Viz specifically has said that they're looking to partner with, which is some kind of company that does not exist. Yeah, I mean, you're just getting sort of these conflicts of different perceived barriers that don't all agree with each other. I mean, is there any ways it's all going to work itself out, or do we have to just kind of ignore it and just seek gray market options for the foreseeable future to make it usable?
I think the tough part with the VPN thing is I mean, the other side of the besides the contractual reasons of keeping them running, of keeping the barriers up is then the VPN subverts that, and then you can't, they don't want people to use VPN because they'd like to dream that one day they would monetize Canada and that they would wait patiently where this blocked off, that somehow Canadians would never see this, and thus, that piracy doesn't exist in any other format, so that if VPNs, don't allow the ad dollars. If I watch a show on Yahoo screen via VPN, I'm still getting American ads because the whole point is that it's spoofing my location in the United States. Yeah. So it's not, it's messing with their ad numbers. It messes specifically with their CPM because I imagine VPN users are not clicking on ads. So that's lowering their CPM rate.
It's taking up bandwidth
which then
as well.
Lowers the value. Oh, yeah, well, I mean, taking up bandwidth would be fine if you were paying for it by actually clicking through on those ads. You're probably not. They're probably actually click through, sold ads as opposed to, impressions sold. Could be wrong on that. That's a guess.
But even if you do, those advertisers are looking for American eyeballs, not Canadian. So,
yeah. Well, the thing is you would at least lie convincingly and you would have technically helped. Not really, because eventually if all of the ad traffic was actually coming through VPN and it was all people who would never converted to a sale, eventually you'd still see that ad traffic lose value. But yeah, you do get in, I think as Lance touched on, the logistical problems that even with, I mean, whoever Funimation's partnered with a video service happens to be smart enough to sell on the back of the Canadian impressions specific advertising, but not every ad network's set up for that, and you may want to work with whatever ad network's going to give you the most money for your main streaming target. And I imagine part of Hulu putting off Canada is you need to set up, particularly from their point of view, the scale of it, a Canadian ad sales arm and so on and so forth. And they're like, not worth it.
Yeah. I think primarily with Hulu is just the major networks with the TV shows where they have exclusives, or it's all the major networks where it's like, we sell this to CTV, we sell this to Global, and it might be in their contracts.
Yeah,
and so
probably not helping.
So it might be just like, might just be a deal that it's like, okay, well, we have to support these two things. Okay, well, we won't touch you and everything. Yeah, the problem is with all the anime companies is with Hulu is your better deal. I would say that if YouTube had a better CPM, everything would be on YouTube and we wouldn't have this discussion. It's just that Hulu gives you a better CPM than YouTube, because you can watch a lot of the stuff on YouTube as well. It's just that other companies in Japan, YouTube is just not viewed well. And that's why you don't see a whole lot of anime on YouTube. Because I think the solution is just a global solution. It's, if it's a Funimation, if it's a Crunchyroll, and now I'm seeing more anime on Viewster. Do y'all get Viewster in Canada?
I actually have no idea.
One of the guys working on that is Rob Peretta. And he was the one he was at Crunchyroll, and he also did Bandai Namco, and he's doing a lot with Viewster. So I don't know, if they're getting
I just hit Viewster, and like the top thing on their banner is school days.
Yeah. Can you get it? Can you get it in Canada?
Hold up, I'm trying to stream. We'll see what happens.
I'm trying to
see if it. I'm hearing my Skype like bulk. Oh, it's going. It's going. I could watch School Days on Viewster.
Okay, good.
All right.
Yay, alternatives.
I know what I'm watching tonight then.
All right. Yeah,
nice
it's like I know of Viewster because that one person is on LinkedIn is like, oh, Viewster, and I hear Viewster a little bit because I know that we've licensed a little bit of our content on Viewster, but I just don't know if they are going global with content or licensing it or whatnot. I think a lot of the alternatives is, if anime companies can find secondary alternatives where if they can't be on, like if Viz is on a Hulu, well, can they work out a Canadian only
Actually, that's interesting because when Viz first launched their streaming, they were on Hulu and Juiced. I don't know what has become of Juiced.
Oh,
yeah.
I remember Juiced. Oh, Juiced is a nightmare for me.
Oh dear.
Yeah, they linked to Juiced as their Canadian alternative, but then that just kind of went away after a while.
Yeah, Juiced went away. Yeah.
Was Funimation on Juiced too?
We were using their video backend for a little bit.
Huh.
But then their video backend just wasn't, too much buffer, and then that was whenever the variable bit rate was just becoming new. And so it was just not ready for prime time yet.
And then it just never happened.
That was years upon years ago.
Yep.
So
I assume everything Funimation in terms of your own backend is now in house. You're not trying to like subcontract that.
Oh no, everything's been after Juice. Everything's been just internal.
Good move.
It's always been Funimation's always been buy or build. It's always build.
Well, I mean, with Viz and probably the I think what has generated the most controversy with their inability to get their content to Canada is Sailor Moon, because of course Sailor Moon is significantly popular.
Sailor Moon was born in Canada. I always think Sailor Moon's born in Canada.
Yeah, Sailor Moon is definitely one of the shows. I mean, that last back half of the old Sailor Moon R-dub was made for Canada, and it was a huge hit here long before it even showed up on national TV in the States. I mean, it's understandable that the new dub would be made in LA instead of Canada, but like it's just so, it almost seems inconsiderate just to not make some kind of exception for that. I mean, if Viz is listening, they can put it on Viewster, I guess. That's one solution. I imagine they don't want to work with Crunchyroll or any of the, perceived competitors. Even though I've noticed that Viz hasn't had any simulcasts for quite a few seasons now, so it's kind of interesting to see how that dynamic is sort of developing, or maybe even leveling off. I'm almost expecting of it that Sailor Moon will just get dumped on Crave TV or something at this point. I don't want that to happen, but it's almost starting to seem like the most likely outcome for this.
Yeah, I think the most likely outcome is a company would be very smart just to do a 24-hour channel, just 24-hour anime channel that similar to what Bloomberg, because in the States, Bloomberg, Vivo, all the American music companies have Vivo. And it's on YouTube, but then they have Vivo.com where it's a 24-hour MTV where you can just turn it on and watch that. Russian TV RT has, you can just download that on the Roku and you can watch it. If people want anime on TV, it's for discovery.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is assuming that streaming is like some kind of replacement for television broadcast, which I disagree with completely.
It's absolutely not. Yeah, it's absolutely not, because TV, whenever I would do all the surveys on the survey cards to this day, it's like, what got you into anime? Number one answer all the time is TV. That's what gets people in. But then, because, the new TV is Netflix, is Hulu, because people that just go to Netflix and then they watch a sci-fi movie and then Netflix recommends them anime. I'm like, what's this?
I still argue that even the best curation system that Netflix can develop, it can't replace, having somebody who actually knows the content running a block on a television network to sort of introduce content that way, much like the people behind Toonami run that block, which is, again, what makes it something worth trying to stream in this country to watch, just because it's such a well put together block. And, of course, Bionics was when it was on YTV as well for 5 years.
Because I think, one idea to your, watching Toonami is Silicon Dust HD Home Run Prime. I use that as my cable box, where I use Windows Media Center as my cable box. Cause whenever I would turn on Verizon Fios, I would get a freaking ad every time I would turn on my TV. I'm like, I already have your service. Don't sell me things. And so I gave away that box. I have HD Home Run Prime. They're launching a Kickstarter where now, they're doing their own subscription service where, they have a schedule, and, Plex is one of the stretch goals. And so so with Plex is if you have a dedicated TV in your house running TV, and it's over the network, if you're connected to that network, then you could watch what's on that network. So if you have something like in Seattle that has a dedicated HD Home Run cable card that's on that computer, on that network, and you could just, get it, log in, and you can view it. That might be the nerdy alternative.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing about all these VPNs and workarounds, I mean, you can...
It's a workaround.
Yeah, they're all workarounds is the thing. I mean, there's nothing that's actually illegal about using these.
My Oppo DVD player is my workaround for getting the Young Ones, Spaced, Red Dwarf, all these box sets from the UK.
Yeah, exactly. And well, that's what makes this whole thing interesting, because I mean, you can use all these workarounds to access this content. Pretty much the only thing you're violating in most cases is a possibly a terms of service, and in a lot of cases it may not even be there for all any of us really know. But I mean, if breaking the law isn't actually involved in this process, I mean, it just seems like companies might become complacent in sitting back and letting all these gray market workarounds happen, rather than being proactive and actually trying to adjust region,
monetizing their market.
Yeah, monetizing markets, trying to adjust to different regions in a way that is actually beneficial for them and the audience as well.
Yeah.
But it just seems that the existence of having just sort of these soft workarounds that aren't really hurting anybody it might almost be encouraging them to uphold region barriers rather than try and work around the problem.
Yeah, the one thing the thing that just puzzles me, and I know from firsthand, is people think that piracy is a threat, but piracy isn't a threat. It's untapped market. It's untapped demand. It's actually proving that your content is wanted, and a certain percentage of the people will never buy your product, but a certain percentage of the people saying, I want this show so much, I want to watch it now. A percentage of that will buy the DVD when it comes out, but then they'll buy it on Amazon UK because it's on the market. I think that a smart company would actually go with, you'd have to have a smart, someone legal, someone with a good IT background, just to go through the channels of, the IRCs, and just looking at the streams and seeing what areas and what countries, or a company that is licensing a show, that they would actually monitor all the countries that it's being pirated, and then go to these countries like, look, here's how popular it is, and just use real BitTorrent streaming data. So,
well, my opinion has always been that services like Netflix, iTunes, Crunchyroll, none of these would have existed if it hadn't been for piracy. Yeah. These are all ways to adhere to customer demand that is being demonstrated through piracy. And it almost seems that if people weren't trying to work around these boundaries, then companies wouldn't actually be using the technology to its fullest extent in order to deliver their product.
Yeah, and it's also just this is history repeating with the music industry. There's a great book, Appetite of Self-Destruction, that talked about, it's a Rolling Stone writer talking about the music industry in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when the CD was popular, and then Napster coming in, that I think it was a Rhapsody had the entire model that you see today over 10 years ago, but then the music industry was afraid.
Yeah.
Yet, if they would have
not only
figured
did it
that
have the
out,
model, it had it with much more stringent DRM. So if they had embraced it and made that the default, they might have. I mean, ultimately the DRM would have been broken, but they might have made it a lot more acceptable if they had made the same kind of gear shift that they made between we're not taking LPs back and you've got to take CDs. If they'd done the same, we're not taking CDs back. You have to hit the subscription streaming service.
Yeah, region codes. Region codes are just horrible if you're not in a main country.
Just going back to the way that these artificial barriers conflict with actual political barriers. I mean, the fact that we can't even get this figured out inside North America, or even just between United States and Canada, what hope is there for this to actually work globally? It almost seems like streaming is like a false promise.
Well, I think what's happening is a good example of what's going to work is the company's getting deals with, it's like with Netflix. I was just doing some research before the show. I was just curious because, House of Cards was in Netflix here, but it was on TV in other countries. So it wasn't on Netflix whenever Netflix wasn't set up. With House of Cards in Australia, House of Cards used to be on Foxtel, but you had to get a Foxtel subscription to watch House of Cards. And then like Gizmodo of Australia had an article in 2014. It says House of Cards Season 2, How to Watch in Australia. And it tells you Ola, Unblock Us, Getflix, and Tunnel Bear. And then in 2015, whenever Netflix is opening up to Australia, now they get Season 1, 2, and 3. It was Netflix hadn't set up shop yet. And so I think if there's going to be one area where if it's easy for companies just to dump content somewhere where it's just something that they can just get money, send their content, and just be done with it, that's basically how companies work.
Well, another challenge to doing it globally is the demand for streaming in some countries, because, here in the US and Canada, our television industry is pretty much completely broken. And we often think that, going back to what I said before about streaming not being a replacement for television broadcast, sometimes people think that television as a medium is broken, which is really not true, especially in countries that, have a strong infrastructure for that kind of thing, like Australia, for instance, or the UK, or especially Japan, where the entire television industry doesn't seem to have budged in the last 20 years, because there's just no perceived problem with it. In my mind, that kind of creates some other challenges or disincentives to actually make this all work in a global sense.
You have all this content, but now it's who produces it. So Netflix produces their own content, so getting by region coding is fine because they own it. Amazon, the content is fine, they own it. It's going to happen with HBO in America. You can now just get HBO. You don't have to have a cable channel. Like if you have an Apple TV, you can download the HBO Go app and just pay HBO. You don't have to get cable.
No, I think
definitely
that.
And so I wonder if that's gonna, if that step is, HBO and Warner saying, okay, well, let's make HBO globally to compete with Netflix.
Well, for now it's US only because that service isn't coming to Canada.
It sucks.
Yeah.
Well, again, HBO's probably licensed some of these shows to a Canadian partner, and I think that's.
Yeah.
I think it.
Yeah, they're all owned by Shaw.
No,
so. Sorry, by actually Bell has the lion's share of the HBO stuff. I think a lot of it's on Crave TV actually.
Yeah, no, it's going to be weird. I think the big thing is you're right. Streaming is very different for Discovery. I wouldn't say that it's not happening. TV may still be a prime driver, but I think I have definitely run into people who, even if their first little taste of anime was TV, they deepened a lot faster because they could hit Crunchyroll or Funimation.com and then just marathon show after show after show after show.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen usage numbers that I imagine marathoning was surprisingly, you had people following along with the simulcast, but there's probably a lot of I missed this show, better watch the entirety of it.
Or it's I have a 14-day trial. How much anime can I get within 14 days? And it's like, crap, I didn't finish it. Okay, now I have to get a subscription.
The good old drug dealer model.
Yes.
No, but that's at the same time though, yeah, it changes the nature of discovery, and I think at the international level, yeah, as Netflix starts to say like, wait, we've set up shop in every country, so this just debuts globally. That's one side of it, but that may be trickier. You're right, due to the very unique nature of how anime is produced as a medium in Japan, making that translate, barring everybody involved saying, well, we'll all get behind Daisuke, and Daisuke gradually figuring out what they need to do in each country, which still will ultimately involve local partnership of a sort, though maybe more, a Daisuke USA that's handling, North American localization versus localization in other territories. It's not that you can't do it, but it is, you're right, it's a huge infrastructural thing. And it's not just, the tech is almost it's certainly not non-trivial, and even the people who are really good at it have trouble with it.
So you may have noticed Netflix has announced recently they have plans to expand to Japan. And in that press release, they implied intentions to get in on anime production and anime distribution in Japan. Given how the otaku market generally works, how they usually respond to foreign companies or entities sort of interfering with things there, do you think that whatever plans they have might actually be feasible and change the way things work globally? Or, do you think that this is just a misguided venture that is probably going to end badly?
The one understanding within all the different production companies and bidding shows in general is they want competition. And so if Netflix gives competition, now this is just for international. Locally, streaming hasn't really caught on. It's still a big TV watching. Physical is still there. I mean, granted, I haven't really done a whole lot of research just from just anecdotal, because you have Nico Nico, but outside of Nico Nico, I just don't know what they have. I just wonder if within Netflix getting in and being there, you need people in the territory, and hopefully it's people that have worked within the industry in Japan that Netflix has hired to run it. Yeah. So it runs like a Japanese company, just with funding by Netflix in the Netflix name. Hopefully they're doing it that way, instead of saying, oh, we're Netflix, we're the big fish, you should do it our way. They should learn how to do it kind of like the reason why a lot of Japanese companies say, oh, we can do this in America and fail is because they're marketing the way that their home country, the country that they grew up in and work in, did it. So, if Netflix was smart, they would work like a Japanese company and do stuff like that instead of like, we're going to shake this up and do it our way. They're going to fail if they do that.
Yeah.
That's been their thing so far, is just sort of interfering in flawed business models.
Yeah, I think it's tough because like they are ultimately of the disruption generation of tech companies. And while there are certainly aspects to the Japanese model that could probably be very lucrative to disrupt, and would be in the end run beneficial to disrupt, and be good for the creative studios. Like if they're in a position where they can say, you're not going to have to worry about your timeline on this, just take the time to do it right. We'll bankroll this so that it gets done right. Yeah, there's probably like that's an angle that you could use to sell yourself. That's outside of the regular model. If you treated it not like television production, but like not big expensive OVAs, but take the television budget, but with an OVA schedule, there's a place where they can make some very good shows, but then that's still, okay, you've made a very good show. You will probably be able to turn around and certainly, show that and get viewership on your North American streaming platform. But you have an uphill battle in terms of knowing your market in Japan. And I mean, it's not just, some of what has worked for Netflix, and certainly what they seem to be going in the North American model, is get known creatives, who do well on the platform to make content directly for the platform. And you could do the exact same with anime. They could take a look at all of the streaming data for everything they've got on there and say, and come to the conclusion, we need this director with this studio working hopefully in this genre, if he'll concede to that, and then let him go at it for 13 or 26 episodes. You know, they're in a position where they can make that kind of insight into what would probably work as a show. But the end sales of it, particularly for, I think, the very unique marketing that you have in the otaku market in Japan, which is like, Japan's different to North America, but then like otaku Japan's more different still. That's something that they have to have people on the ground do. And it's not that they couldn't find people who would probably be great to consult on that. You know, there are people, you know, there are bridges that there are people who they could hire that would bridge that cultural gap for them. But you have to go in knowing that you have that deficiency. And that's, I think, often a blind spot. I mean, coming from the tech industry background and seeing these companies admit when they've blown it and when they need to talk to somebody outside of their worldview is sometimes very tricky, and it's sometimes the make or break. It's what keeps a company in the game versus not. I mean, Google famously brought on Eric Schmidt out of Microsoft because they knew at that point they needed somebody outside of that worldview to help them keep going. And then they dropped them off as they learned how to do that. But, you know, will Reed Hastings do that in Netflix with Japan? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts?
I'm gonna miss seeing Lance at cons. Unless you happen to be at the same event as me, but I don't go to cons the way I used to.
Same here.
No, well, like you had at one point, I remember seeing, we're going to have one little bit of reminiscing here. I remember in 2004 seeing you at like SakuraCon and then seeing you later in the year at Otakon, and you just looked like you'd been run over by a steamroller because you had been doing every con for them that year.
Well, it was every con and then also launching Kitty Grade and Tenchimuyo while prepping the launch of Fullmetal Alchemist while we were growing with brand managers. And
you brought on a lot of people that year.
Yeah, and then that was the time where you helped out getting materials in Japan, and you also would do your own media budgets and buying.
Wow.
And so
you had so this was basically you were kind of handling for one show everything. Well, for multiple shows, almost everything.
What's great now with Funimation is everybody's been specialized. And just, you know, we have a team to get materials in Japan. And so they're constantly with Japan getting materials and checking through and coordinating with DVDs and production and then coordinating with the simulcast because the simulcast and now doing the simuldubs.
Yeah, no, I imagine that requires.
That is just unfathomable how much effort and time and just the logistics seem crazy, but it gets done. It's just amazing.
I feel like it's got to be a bit like Shirobako, just that nonstop going on. I'm not sure if you watched that yet.
No, I haven't yet.
You really?
Oh, it's fantastic.
You would probably.
You need to see it.
Well, you're probably already too familiar with some of it, I'm sure.
Well,
we're hoping that season 2 will factor in the world of international simulcasts in the production process.
What I wish would be really good with Shirobako if they would include the international licensing people in that team, and if they would show committees and approvals. If they had an episode of international approvals, oh, that'd be fantastic.
And then we get our caricature of like you or somebody.
Oh yeah. It's fun.
Actually, no, wait. So wait, Sentai got that, so he'd get Matt Greenfield. And then he could do his own dub.
His own dub would be a grumble.
Well, that was Zon N Canada. I hope you enjoyed it. Big thanks to Lance and Karl for coming on the show. Also thanks to Karl for our great theme song. You can check out his stuff at Ultraklystron.com. As always, you can send me your feedback or thoughts through the comment form at zonin.ca or on Twitter @JBetteridge. If you know anyone who might like the show, please recommend it. See you again.